Good day, One Love family. It's your boy Seth Garu Baxter with Maker's Bar. We are creating with our goal 1 million leaders today for tomorrow. Again, it is a distinct honor and pleasure. I am with you today. I thank you so much for joining us. I remember growing up, I had this understanding that you have leaders, and then you have those who are inspirational in your life, and then you have mentors. It is with honor today I get to present one of those mentors that has been instrumental in my life, that some of you guys know, your dreadlock wearing, one love hippie kind of character dude has been inspired by such a character as this person who is my awesome guest today. With this honor, Dave Powell is not only an author, which is what we're going to talk about today, and his life. He is also a YMCA longtime executive director, history and teaching in the field with the YMCA, a father and a husband. He works and guides to ensure that their work has maximum impact with his book. Today, we're going to be discussing that book that he's written for us. And the title of the book you're going to be hearing us discuss today is Hands On, a Volunteer Guide to Making a Difference. And it's a book that discusses mastering the art of managing, recruiting, and recognizing volunteers, which has been instrumental to me. Dave has been one of those persons that gave me my appreciation for my contribution and spending my time to volunteer myself. And not only has he done that with me, but it has encouraged me to inspire thousands of others. This man who I'm honored to have here with me today has encouraged me to talk to thousands of people about the importance that during chaotic times, what is the best thing you can do is give of yourself. Volunteering is one of those aspects that we don't often think about during these crazy times, but it is a valuable asset to self-confidence and encouragement. And not only that, but thinking outside of ourselves and giving back, how that rewards the internal self. Also, the encouragement and masterful nature of having someone that knows and sees deep inside of you. That's this gentleman that we have with us today. It's my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce to you my mentor for the career that I've ended up with and the place where I'm at. Distinct, humble honor it is to have Dave Powell, author and YMCA executive, longtime career YMCA director. Dave, I can't even say before tears can come down again how much of an honor it is to have you here to discuss your book and have you here with me on Maker's Bar. Thank you so much, Dave.
Well, you bet. It's an honor to be there with you, Seth. And sorry I didn't wear my dreads today. I've never been able to grow them. I've been bald since I was 25. So, I'm here just covering it up with my microphone and headset here. Anyway, I thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate the chance to talk about my book a little bit and maybe my career a little bit. Basically, you're right. I've been a career with the YMCA, but I've been 43 years before I retired, and I am retired now. But 43 years as a professional, getting paid by an organization that I truly love. But it started way before that. It started as a kid. I was an only kid growing up, and as about a 10-year-old kid, I, had neighborhood friends and that sort of thing, but I didn't have a place to go and call home as far as my parents. My parents were both alcoholics, and they not soon, but they did finally pass away from their addiction to alcohol. And so I was kind of on my own, and who are my role models and where are the people that I'm going to see and model my life after. I did that through the YMCA, being a kid as a junior leader, going down to Glendale, California, and being part of that YMCA there. I did start as a kid, growing up through that program, and always was interested in what's happening behind the scenes and what can I do to help out. And so I started, without even knowing it, as a volunteer as a young kid for anything that needed to be done. If it was sweeping the floor, if it was handing out ping pong balls for the youth lobby or whatever it happened to be, I was there to do it. And never did I think my life would turn into a career. I was in the military for a short time, but when I got out of the military, I came and became professional with the YMCA and whatever it took as far as schooling and education and that sort of thing. So I've been able to meet a lot of fantastic people through my journeys through the YMCA. I've been many places. I'm now in Arizona, but as I was growing up through the Glendale YMCA, I did take an interim assignment at the Burbank Y as their CEO. Moved on to the Los Angeles YMCA, which is the biggest in Southern California, and had a couple branches that I had the opportunity to be the executive director there. Where I met Seth was at the West Valley YMCA.
Woo
And
woo, one love.
yeah, there he goes. He's on his place there. But I got up and started YMCA in the Santa Ynez Valley and up above Santa Barbara, and had a chance to start a Y from bottom up, a ground up organization. And at that point, really understood what it meant to have volunteers. You always need volunteers, and I'll get a little deeper into that as we talk a little bit more. From there, I went and came back and went to, I was recruited to Arizona to be the chief operating officer here, vice president and chief operating officer in southern Arizona. So I packed up my family and moved them to Arizona. And that was really quite interesting. In Arizona, it's not like California where the weather's always great. In Arizona, it's a very dry heat, and we're going through 100-degree days and that sort of thing. So I love air conditioning now, but I also love being outdoors. And but from there, I spent 7 years in that position, and then I was recruited by the National Y to come on board in Chicago, and I was fortunate to be able to work from home. There were 4 of us that did what I did, and I was in charge of 17 states. And part of that was developing a training network. And we have probably 250 at the time classes that we train our staff and some volunteers in how to do either technical skills, fundraising, whatever it may be, or be a lifeguard. There are a lot of things that we do, and I had the opportunity to be at the top of the chain when it came to the National YMCA, and got to travel. I was traveling probably 50% of my time. Now, I don't recommend that for anybody because when you've got a family at home, you don't like to travel away from too often. But I did do that for 12 years, and then I retired from that position and moved into retirement. At that point, well, what am I going to do with myself? Well, of course, I volunteer. I'm volunteering right now I live in a town called Oro Valley, which is right above Tucson. Oro Valley has a police department, and I had volunteered for the town. I was on their water commission and chaired that for 6.5 years. But then when I got out, I decided that I wanted to do something that I could either help them with whatever knowledge I gained over the course of my life and help them out. And so I became a volunteer cop, if you can believe it, 2 positions that are totally different from each other. But right now we get into our patrol cars and we do dark houses. We have a motto, no confrontation. So we don't carry weapons or have any kind of authority to stop anything. We do have a radio that we can call a regular licensed and certified officer to come and help if we see it. So we're kind of their eyes and ears. And we do dark houses, like when people go on vacation, we check their houses and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of things we do, and we do patrol, and once again, the eyes and ears of the police force there. So
Dave,
a lot of
if I may interrupt you just very quickly,
you sure may.
Dark houses. When you say dark houses, Just lights being out, dark houses, as in
Dark
empty
house
no.
is just a term for people gone on vacation.
Okay.
If they leave for a week or more, they can sign up for a dark house patrol, and we'll come at least once a week and do a patrol around their house, make sure everything's locked up, there's nothing broken, nothing was broken in, that they locked all their doors when they left, that sort of thing. So we do that. The certified officers used to do it in the early days and as a free service to their residents. But then when it got too big and they had a little more crime to deal with, we took that over as the volunteers, and so we worked very closely with the officers and that sort of thing. And matter of fact, we have 3 officers in our unit that we kind of report to. But it's been kind of fun, a lot different than anything I did with the YMCA, and so that was interesting, and it gives me something to do and make a lot of new friends that way. I got into
And it's still
writing.
volunteering. And
It's
it's
still
still
volunteering.
volunteering.
Yep. You double my pay there, and I'm still making nothing. So, and that's okay. That's okay. That's what a volunteer is all about. I always had a dilemma back when I worked for the Y. Volunteers would come in. So, well, what do I get for volunteering? Well, volunteering is something you get no remuneration for. You volunteer for the sheer pleasure of doing something bigger than yourself, and whatever skill or sometimes you don't even have to have skill in an area. You may be a bookkeeper or something of that nature, and you may want to get out of that because you're doing that every day. You may want to coach a team or do something of that nature. So there's probably as many stars in the sky as volunteer opportunities that you would have becoming a volunteer in whatever area you have like an interest in or you're passionate about and that sort of thing. So one of the things we did teach at the national level was volunteerism. How do you treat volunteers? A lot of things my book talks about is that it's not a YMCA training manual by any stretch of the imagination. It goes much further than the YMCA and some of the newer areas that we look at, micro volunteering, some of the training aspects, how you treat volunteers, that sort of thing. So I got into writing and I really enjoyed that. Actually, this is my second book. My first book was about presentation skills and those kinds of things. And um, this book is actually much better than the first because I knew what I was doing this time when I was writing. At least better. The next book will be a lot better than this book. But right now, I've had the opportunity to really look at 2 aspects of volunteering. One is, how do you be a good volunteer? What does it take for you to be a good volunteer for an organization? How do you get into it? What do you expect from that organization? I tell a story in the book about a young boy who happened to volunteer. Now, my wife is also a great volunteer. And when we got here, we used to do Christmas trees back in the Southern California days. And I was glad to get out of the Christmas tree business. Well, my wife wanted to run a Christmas tree lot at one of the local Ys that I was in charge of. And so she did. And I thought, oh, I'm still in Christmas trees. Well, that's okay. And we had a lot of volunteers running the Christmas trees, from soup to nuts, from unloading the trees to selling them to loading them onto cars and sending them to the house. There was a young boy that I mentioned in the book that his motivation was he wanted to do something behind the scenes, kind of like I mentioned myself in the beginning. He saw all the staff getting together and what are they going to be doing? Why are they not here in the youth center after school with me? And they were getting ready for the tree lot. And so he became a volunteer for them. This young man, the one thing he wanted that really turned him on physically was he wanted a T-shirt that said volunteer on it, YMCA volunteer.
Oh, wow.
And that's all that he needed. And And, he was carrying trees. By the end of the night, he was dead tired, slept real well for the next day. But that is a story that's in the book, and I use that in the introduction to kind of share people's motivation for volunteering and that sort of thing. But volunteering goes deeper than that. The leadership of the YMCA is done by volunteers. It's not done by paid staff, though you have paid staff that came about in about the 1920s, that they started paying staff. It was all run by volunteers. Matter of fact, there is a YMCA in Louisiana that's run by all volunteers. You think of the big buildings with all the health equipment and that kind of thing, and people paying dues to go in. Well, it takes staff to run those things, but it really takes the leadership of being volunteer based. And the volunteers help raise the money for the Y. They help lead and make sure that we're staying on the straight and narrow. They're really the bosses there. And when you volunteer for something, you really become an owner and a co-producer of that organization. So you'll see volunteers that have been there for years and years and years, and staff kind of come and go as they build their careers. Myself, I moved many times in my career to accept a job that had maybe more responsibilities or helped me move along my career. But you see the staff that, or you see the volunteers that still were at the Y. Matter of fact, in Seth's case, volunteers that he worked with when he was a staff member, getting paid for doing this, but he started as a volunteer.
That's
And
right.
you see,
Right.
volunteer, they become the board chairs and they become the people that basically set the direction of the YMCA. And so when I say co-producer and co-owner, they really are, and they work in partnership with the paid staff, and they are the real important cog in the production of what goes on with that particular organization. Many organizations out there, for instance, I said that I worked with as a volunteer with the police department in Oro Valley. I was also on the water commission, and that was a volunteer position. And so we helped set direction for the paid staff that were really working it. Now, being a police, pseudo police officer, not really an officer, but a pseudo person working with the police department, there's a lot of rules and regulations. So they don't set us out in anything that will cause us any danger, no confrontations, that sort of thing. But we do assist them in law enforcement, making the community safer than it is before we had that position. So we're really ambassadors for law enforcement. And since when you see a cop, it's usually you've done something wrong or someone has done something wrong to you. We're the ambassadors, and we're the ones that people come up and want to talk to and that sort of thing. But we do see the other side, that the police officers are really humans and good folks and people you'd want to be around. So I say to anybody that wants to take a look at the book, I stress a lot of different volunteer opportunities in there, not just YMCA or just anything that I'm doing currently, but a whole range of ways to manage volunteers, to train volunteers, to recognize volunteers, to recruit volunteers. And so anybody that's managing volunteers or wants to start managing volunteers within their organization to expand the reach of what their organization can do, that's a way to do it. So that's kind of how I got into it.
And then, so Dave, tell our audience, if you wouldn't mind, does it take some people, I think, especially nowadays, think that volunteering, it means you just have to have a good heart, or you have to have people think of you as having a good heart. Volunteering to me is indiscriminate. And it doesn't discriminate against, or it doesn't make a judgment against one's heart. So what would you, if when talking about volunteering, does it mean you have to have gone to a priest and done confessions? What makes a good volunteer?
Well, a good volunteer is going to be a person that has time, talent, and treasure to give to somebody else. And, you don't have to, it's not a religious based thing, though a lot of organizations that are faith based use volunteers quite a bit. But it doesn't have to be that way. It could be, for instance, working with the Water Commission, we had people in there that just had concern because I'm in Arizona and we're always lacking water. How do we control water? How do we make sure people get water? And how do we be a voice for the community coming back? And it doesn't take to have a big heart to do it. It just takes your time and talent and passion to make something better than what you found going in. And other than that, there's a lot of different motivations, and the book kind of covers a lot of the motivations people have for being volunteers. It doesn't measure your heart or that sort of thing. Some people, hey, when their time is up volunteering, they step back, or they may be asked to step back if they're not doing it right. They still have responsibilities to the organization. They also have to maintain straight and narrow, whatever the philosophy of that organization is, legal or philosophically for that organization. They need to adhere to that. And if a volunteer isn't adhering to that, then they may be asked to step down. Sometimes we call someone that's been around too long. We ask them to step back, but we say, well, let's plaque that person, meaning give them a plaque, congratulate them for all the years they were doing great work, and now time for someone else to step in and do it. So there's a lot of reasons people do it. It isn't just having a big heart, and doesn't require a big heart. Sometimes you get it because you're passionate about what that organization brings to the community, brings to whatever it may be that they're doing.
And that's where I came in, because some people who are our viewers right now might not know that my volunteering came through a passion of government and politics. Dave and I would work out together on the treadmill, and I was a new dad whose wife had left, and you and I would discuss politics. And you introduced me to this program, Youth in Government, and talked about the volunteer portion of it as an advisor, and having a love and an interest for politics and or the discussion of it and working with young people. That was a big portion of what encouraged me to volunteer myself. So I'd imagine sometimes volunteering is about your passion. What you don't want it to be a paid position, but you want to volunteer because it's part of your passion. How can you commit to your passion? And I found myself being fulfilled through volunteering to be a part of the YMCA and Youth in Government, because my passion was working with young people and discussing politics. So I would you agree that sometimes volunteering itself is, you'll find self-fulfillment as well as contribution back because you're participating in those passions you have yourself? Would you say that's also a starter as far as what a volunteer would be?
Oh, absolutely. I was a dumb jock when I started volunteering in youth and government long time ago as a younger person. And I wanted nothing to do with politics, but I saw what these kids were doing at a very young age. They were writing bills, they were debating bills, they were sometimes they were even scratching each other's backs as far as who can get something for somebody, a vote for somebody, or that sort of thing. So they were
Oh
learning
yeah.
some of that aspect for politics in the beginning. But in essence, they had an interest in politics, and they learned it through the advisors, and they learned it through the program itself. It actually, and this was in California, and a lot of the states have these youth and government programs through the YMCA. They actually use the chambers, the Senate Assembly chambers, the governor's office, the Supreme Court office, and all that kind of thing, to play their roles for 5 days up in Sacramento. And they spend their time writing their own bills and debating their bills and having hearings. Sometimes as volunteers, we bring lawyers in into the delegation, and kids would sponsor their bills and get questioned by professionals out there, and that would
Who
hone
were
their bills so
volunteering?
they'd be stronger. who are
And those
volunteering.
professionals volunteered their time. We had council members, congressman members, attorneys who volunteered their time to come and participate in the program as well, to advise and or be a part of it as a speaker, etc.
Some people don't start volunteering with getting in at that level, being fully engulfed with, spending a lot of time and their personal time for a lot of their time and their personal passion toward it. They may start as a mom slicing oranges for their son or daughter's basketball game at the gym. And sometimes a small act of volunteerism, they get a little more interested. They want to do a little bit more, and they want to do a little bit more. And pretty soon they become the chair of the board. They're a leader. They're raising funds for the organization if it happens to be a nonprofit organization. And that just only limits it to the nonprofit part of the organization or part of organizations that do raise money. But there are so many other types of volunteer opportunities that come along that you do. You can volunteer for your school. Parents come and volunteer at the school. There's obviously no financial remuneration for that, but they're helping their kid have a better education. So as many things that are out there, it'd be almost impossible to try to name how many possibilities there are to volunteer. And I really say that everybody has a talent. They have the time. What can they do to go and help somebody else?
Is that where it comes in, where you said in the title, it says volunteer guide to making a difference?
So oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
I was
interrupt
just
you.
going to actually, that's okay. So explain that a little and making a difference, because I find myself of late that I know our world is very preoccupied with a number of different things that are going on. And some people might not know that volunteering does make a difference. So I was curious, as far as the title, is that part of what your attraction was to that title, to get them to know volunteering does make a significant difference? Or if you can elaborate on where the title came from?
Sure. Everybody that volunteers, I have found through my experience, do want to make a difference, whether it's slicing an orange and giving nourishment to young basketball players at the halftime of a game, to making a difference in the organization itself. So how do you make that, or how do you make that difference? And a lot of it's just like a job. You show up, you're there, you're giving of yourself, and what you have to give makes that organization better. In the meantime, what you're getting in return is the pure pleasure of doing something much bigger than yourself, doing something that is helping others. And when the thing's all said and done, you have made a difference. And so, for the volunteer side, if you're going to want to be a volunteer, the volunteer side of this whole thing, it's all about making that difference, and the feeling you get from, at the end of the day, what did you do to make a difference to make this world better for somebody else?
Dave, so people say today, oh, it's too crazy. I'm too busy. We have all these things happening. I don't have time to volunteer. What would your response be?
Well, my response for the managers of that organization is you develop opportunities for people to do as little as necessary. It might be micro volunteering, where they're just doing like one task for one thing, and they do, let's say it's a group of parent-child people, dads with their daughters or their sons. They come one night for 2 hours to help sell Christmas trees to help raise money for the Y. Okay, and that's the only thing they do. That's the only thing they had time for. Well, they see it was kind of fun. They made some friends. They got their kids out there. They got to socialize with other people their own age and make a difference, role modeling to their kids. And next thing you know, they want to do it a little bit more and a little bit more. So it's our job when we manage volunteers is to create those opportunities. Doesn't mean we're doing less. Yes, it does expand our horizons, expand our hands out there to get people to do more, but it's the ability to learn ourselves. I can think of one guy, use another YMCA example, another guy that showed up. It was after the earthquake, the Northridge earthquake. He showed up at the desk and he said, I want to enroll my kid in the parent-child program, which was at that time called Indian Guides.
Oh yeah.
And all he wanted to be was a hero in his child's life. How was he going to do that? Something he could spend, because he was newly divorced and the divorce wasn't going exactly as smoothly as he had hoped. And so he wanted to make sure that he was still involved in his child's life. Well, he got so excited about what he was doing, he became a leader of the tribe, our tribe chief, we called him. And then pretty soon he became a fundraiser. And then pretty soon after that, he became the chair of that Y, and kind of expanded and expanded. Well, if you would have asked him, because he was a busy salesman, if you'd asked him in the beginning, I want you to do this and this and this, he said, I don't have time for that. Well, as he grew in the organization and learned more and liked it and appreciated it, he took on more and more responsibilities, made time for that. So we as staff people are really charged with the task of creating those opportunities. It isn't just handing someone a broom and say, hey, go sweep up that floor. It needs to be swept. It is creating a meaningful opportunity for that person to grow and giving them the training that they learn more than what they came in with. So if they're learning leadership, you're giving them some leadership training. There's a 100 different things. If you're doing your job correctly, you're not only training them, and whether it's a one-on-one thing, you're training them all the way along. So it's busy. If you're doing your job right as a paid staff person, you're spending your time in the volunteer ranks, creating those relationships, creating those training opportunity, and creating those opportunities for people to serve bigger than themselves.
Dave, you touched on something. You said in managing the volunteer staff and the administrative portion of it. But let's talk about, does your book discuss the recruitment of volunteers? What is a good, can you give an example of a good recruiting methodology to recruit long-term volunteers and or identify persons that would be interested in volunteering? I know for me, a good portion of what attracted me to it was you and I discussed interests of mine. But what is the beginning stage of recruiting a great volunteer?
Well, in the case you mentioned with yourself involved, it was developing a relationship. And I would never have known that you were interested in politics or anything to that nature if we didn't have conversations about that. And finding out what you were interested in, I was able to say, oh, yeah, maybe Seth would be really good in the youth and government program. And you continued on to do that. Having those discussions and creating those connections, creating those relationships.
So creating the relationships is the way. Would you say that's one of the ways you begin the process of finding?
Absolutely. Now, one of the worst ways to do it is you go into a meeting of some sort and you say, I need some volunteers. Anybody want to volunteer? Well, that's a way to do it, but you're not going to find out someone's passion. You may get someone say, well, I'll come out and help you Saturday, pick up papers along the street. But they didn't enjoy that. You didn't keep tab of what they were doing. And so they're one and done. They're not going to come back and volunteer. But you as a staff person, if you understand what they like to do, and yeah, there may be times that they pick up papers or that sort of thing, but you connect that to the bigger picture, and that's how you get yourself a real true volunteer that comes through the ranks. So the worst way to do it, and I've seen people make that mistake, is they'll put in a flyer, we need volunteers. Well, you're going to get maybe some volunteers, maybe not. It's easy to say no. Go into a meeting, hey, I need someone to volunteer. You may get a volunteer, maybe not. But if I go to Seth and I say, hey, Seth, I noticed you really enjoyed politics and teaching that to a younger generation. Would you be interested in taking a look at this youth and government program? And I went to him directly, asked him specifically what I wanted, how many hours it would take, that sort of thing. Was upfront with him. Didn't say, well, it's going to take you 1 hour a week when it was going to take you 5 hours a week. Was truthful with him and gave him the opportunity to say no, and not in front of a group where you walked in and said, Seth, I'd like you to be the leader of the youth and government group. And he had no desire to do that, but yet he's on the spot. And you probably lost him at that point because he's not going to come back to another meeting because you kind of voluntold him rather than recruited him into a volunteer position. So there's right ways to do it, wrong ways to do it. Sometimes when you do it wrong, just by sheer numbers, you may get somebody who enjoys that. But in reality, it's developing relationships and then finding out what people like. That's why it's hard work. It's not easy work. I won't sit here and pretend that gaining volunteers. Now, once Seth did this, once he became the staff person in charge of that group or the volunteer lead in charge of that group, now he's got people graduating out of the program that had a good experience. He's got now a force of potential volunteers that want to come back and help him in the next year's group or 5 years down the road or whatever. You're always planting the seed. And at some point, these kids that graduate out of high school and they go to college, they come back after they graduate out of college and they want to be part of the youth and government program. And that's just one really finite opportunity, but it is a good illustration for what you asked.
And in elaborating on that point, Dave, I would love to toot your horn and give you some of your flowers as a result of how you taught me as far as recruiting volunteers and finding out their passions. It has gone on to create volunteers that have been currently from a number of the kids I worked with, even their parents. They've gone on, well, going back when I started with you in volunteering, you had volunteers that had already been on the board for 5 years, 10 years of volunteering at the tree lot for 4 years, 10 years, 20 years. And in doing so, I get to toot the horn and say, I was so inspired by the way you taught me about creating relationships, the long-term relationships to build volunteers. There's a technique in that it encouraged, I can say through your teaching and inspiring me, thousands of other volunteers as a part of the statewide youth and government program. And I took it into other elements of my life. And I can say that it is, as you said, it is in creating that relationship, finding their passion, guiding them through the process, which I think one of the things I like to hit on a little bit is then once you do that is managing the process. So these volunteers, in keeping those relationships, I know that's what helped to keep them maintaining their wanting to volunteer. But discuss a little bit what your book says about managing the volunteers to keep long-term volunteers, because that has been one of the things I'm so most proud of with you as my mentor, teaching me that you nurtured those relationships to keep them long-term. You nurtured them, let them know they're a part of a bigger picture. What do you say in your book about managing the volunteers?
Well, first of all, I would say the number one thing is giving people meaningful work. Don't just hand them a broom and say, well, we need to sweep the room over there for the meeting. Yeah, that may be part of it at some point, but you want to give people meaningful work to do. You don't want to just give them make work projects. You want to develop and think about meaningful things those volunteers can do. What is Seth going to do? He's going to maybe take a group of those kids and they're going to work on writing the bill. And that's going to be meaningful work. Okay. And when he comes out, he's going to be proud of what they accomplished. The kids are going to be proud of what they accomplished. And he's going to see it all come to fruition by taking them to Sacramento, watching them debate their bills, get their bill passed or fail. What happened that the bill failed? Well, maybe we try this next time. whatever it may be, but it's meaningful work. Anything you give them, if it's a board member at the organization, what meaningful work do they have? It's just not, hey, I want you to go raise money. Okay, they may or may not want to do that, but what kind of meaningful work? We're going to be talking about some of the policies that we have around a new program that we're developing. And we need you to be on the committee that's going to talk about those policies, how we are going to manage that program. Okay, you as a staff person are the nuts and bolts person. You're the one that is actually managing it. Sometimes you get a volunteer that likes that part of it too, and you get them to work with you. But a lot of times they want to be the person that is making the difference. They're given or encouraged to do meaningful work. And think about yourself. Just think about what you would feel like if you were volunteering. Are you getting meaningful work? And if you start fading away from that organization, why are you? Because they aren't giving you meaningful work. You're just showing up to a meeting and they're talking at you. And rather than giving them some meaningful things to do, whether it's being a part of a speakers bureau or whatever it may be, that they like to do, and you find that out by getting to know people.
And,
Can I answer your question?
that did, because you talked about the long-term aspects of that. What part of it was in creating and maintaining the relationships, and to me that's a part of that, managing the volunteers. So yes, you did answer that question, and I always found that you had a great way to one of the things I remember when I used it when I worked with the young people was during our annual support campaign. You knew how to match volunteers with longer term volunteers. And I think that's a part of it as well. So someone who's been a volunteer for more than a year, or they have been even 6 months, but you knew how to match them up with a novice that was new to volunteering, or maybe they volunteered before, but they hadn't had an experience with a nonprofit like the YMCA, or in your case, maybe the police department. But matching volunteers with someone else who has been doing volunteerism for a long time, I think is a part of that process in building the long-term relationships and how you do manage them. Because mentoring, which again, I can say as the honor is of the Dave Powell, that has been my mentor, is pairing volunteers with a person who's had a relationship with that, because mentors beget mentors. So now this person who you paired up correctly with another person, they will also understand how to teach another person how to volunteer, and thereby becoming a mentor. And I remember seeing that with the Indian Guides and a number of the parent-child programs, youth in government, how some of the advisors volunteered, and they taught building those relationships with new advisors. So that was what you gave to me in the answer. And I was hoping that your book had discussed also what it means to manage volunteers, and a part of that process is matching them with someone else who's had the experience. Am I correct?
Well, absolutely. You can't give someone some meaningful work to do and no tools to do that meaningful work. And so you got to gauge what that tool is, and if it's matching them up with someone who has been in the trench before and can teach them, then they learn that way. Thus, then they expand their knowledge to someone else that they're going to train at some point. Another volunteer opportunity, which is just inside, but it's training and giving people the tools they need to do that job that's going to make a difference.
Now, Dave, you mentioned the tools. Tools sometimes, and I noticed this, and I seem to remember that we did this. Tools, some of that is, and I'm not sure, I'm not sure that everyone knows I do this correctly, but in giving them meaningful jobs, would that also be a part of creating job descriptions that gives them specific duties when they come, or is that too much? What is the line between giving volunteers specifics that help them to understand their job duties and their role?
Job descriptions are essential for that kind of thing. You don't want to ask somebody to do something and you don't lay out how they're to do it and what are some of the boundaries in doing that, meaning that you can't you can't have a you can't drive a kid home because they needed a ride, because it's out of our policy to do that. So you got to have something that tells them what the limits are to that in your training. And the training is the job description. Once again, I will say that's part of the hard work that goes into volunteer development, is having position descriptions or job descriptions, whatever you want to call it, that outline the boundaries, the rules, the philosophy of the organization, and how they're going to do the job. A lot of times they know how to do the job. If it's teaching someone bookkeeping skills, they may know the bookkeeping skills. You don't have to teach them that job, but you got to teach them when they're supposed to come in, what their boundaries are, that they're not going to get paid for it. Those sorts of things.
Well,
what's
they
the
get paid for
remuneration?
it, just not financially. They get paid for
Yeah,
it,
that's right.
just not.
There's not. Yeah, the remuneration is totally of the spirit. So,
Yes.
but you got to have some guidelines for them. Makes the job really hard. That is essential. And once again, if you have that all lined up, it makes it a lot easier when you create a new job or a new opportunity for someone. Here's the job. And you won't see that a lot. People will take the easier way out because they concentrate more on, if I have all these volunteers running around doing stuff, what am I getting paid for? Well, you're getting paid to guide these volunteers, and you guide them by job descriptions, training, relationship building, those kinds of things. And they can expand your hands by doing that job if you do it right. And you'll see a lot of good organizations that have those job descriptions, or, job description sounds so sterile, but it's
It
really a
can,
position
but
description. It's really a way to tell them what you expect from them from the time. I mean, all of a sudden you want them to show up and they don't show up. They don't take it seriously. Well, they would if there was a job description attached to it. They knew that it meant something to the organization. It wasn't just a make work project. It was something that made a difference to that organization. Is that we haven't even touched on, if you don't mind.
please do. Oh, we froze. Dave, are you there? Test.
Event. It's very important that you recognize
Dave.
them in an appropriate efforts. And if you do that, make sure you recognize everybody in there on what they're doing. It's very important that you have some sort of recognition event that tells people you appreciate. Bigger than that, the association or the organization appreciates the job that they're doing. And it may be a dinner. It may be something that doesn't cost anything, like a T-shirt, like our young kid that we talked about in the beginning of the podcast here. We talked about the kid that would have jumped through a wall for a volunteer T-shirt, something that said volunteer on it. Somewhere in his life, volunteer meant something to him. Before he even knew what the word meant, it meant something to him. It might have been through his upbringing or whatever, but volunteer meant something to him, and he wanted a shirt to wear proudly that he volunteered for that organization.
Recognition
So
is key.
sometimes if you give them things, they're just symbolic gestures.
Why are we freezing? Dave? Uh-oh. We are experiencing a few technical difficulties. If you guys would hold on for me. Ladies and gentlemen, give us just a moment.
I don't know how much
Dave,
we lost there.
we lost about a minute,
Seth,
but I'm going to check. Can you hear me okay, Dave? Dave?
Okay.
Dave, can you hear me okay? Dave?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Fine.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I hear
I'm
you.
going to look into that. So forgive us for that
I can
technical
hear you.
situation.
You can't hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Dave, did you hear me? We have these experiences sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, so forgive us for a moment. Dave, can you hear me okay? Dave?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I can hear you also.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for
Okay,
sticking
good.
with us while we had that small technical difficulty. Dave, where I think you left off at, we were probably a good thing is if we rewind a bit to the recognition part, and you were giving the story about the young man and how the recognition portion of that is important as well. And then we start to have some choppiness in the audio.
Okay, so recognizing is or acknowledgement of the effort that people have put forward is very important. Whether a symbolic gift like a T-shirt or a meal or something of that nature, you give to people and bring them all together at some point. Now, I warn you, don't forget a name. Don't bring a whole bunch of people in and start
Oh, yeah.
naming names and you forget somebody because you'll make some enemies that way. But
I had a
you want
horrible experience.
to make sure make sure you keep good records. Yeah, I think
Yes.
we've all run into that. But
yes.
but once again,
I could.
People want to be appreciated for their effort, and whatever you can do to give something symbolic that has very little monetary value, but something like a T-shirt or something that makes them feel part of the group. And once again, you're advertising. So if you put your organization name there, volunteer, you're also advertising. So it is worth something. But acknowledging and recognizing people, I think, is very important that we do that. And I would say you're not doing your job if you haven't gone through in some way, in your own way, recognized a group of people. In the wise way, back where Seth was, you may recognize that youth and government group of volunteers by themselves. They aren't recognized by all the volunteers at the Y, but that would be nice too. The fundraising group, yeah, you want to recognize those guys. You feed them, you give them a meal, and you thank them very much, and you give them a mug or something, and that way they appreciate that. So anyway, acknowledgement and recognition is essential to volunteer development.
And your book just goes through some of those techniques and gives some advice and direction for some managers.
Yes, it does.
And Dave,
yes.
Are there? Can one use your book? Though it's not a YMCA manual for sure, and we made that pretty clear, but it is to some degree an instructional, helpful book that says here are methods on recruiting. Here's some techniques on recruiting, managing volunteers, and what the benefits are, and here's why that makes a difference. I'm understanding that correctly.
Yes, I think if you go through the table of contents, you'll see it's broken down in a way that talks about recruiting. It talks about record keeping. It talks about a lot of those things. Of course,
record
still
keeping. That's what I meant to say. Record keeping. Book, yes, sorry.
Record keeping. Yes, definitely need to keep accurate records. If someone slices oranges for you at a youth basketball game, you want to make sure somewhere you're putting their name down for two reasons. They're a future longer term volunteer, but they're also someone you want to recognize at some point, whether it's just mentioning them in a group of people, which a lot of times is very powerful, or you do something like a big event that you have, depending on the depth of
We are having an issue here once again. Forgive us. Dave, can you hear me okay?
of what a, for that.
Dave? Ladies and gentlemen, the book is Hands On, a volunteer guide to making a difference. The author is Dave Powell, who I can't say enough about. I don't know what's happening with our audio in our studio here. Would you please forgive us for that? But you can pick it up on Amazon. Dave Powell is also on LinkedIn and various platforms. We're going to have some of those platforms in the link and the bio of this particular episode of Maker's Bar. Please, again, forgive us. We will look to clarify and find out what's happened with our audio. But we thank you so much for being a part of it. I can't say enough about Dave Powell being the man that has given me the inspiration for my career and long-term One Love, and about the importance of volunteering and what it does to our spirits. What about each of us has the time and opportunity to create volunteerism. We volunteer and commit our times to things we love. And this book has been instrumental. I myself, because he's my mentor, I'm ordering the book and I advise you to do so. Please check it out. Hands-on volunteer guide to making a difference. As a former corporate recruiter, also as a manager with nonprofits, volunteering has been the foundational work of what we've been able to do. And in my long history of work in various institutions, nonprofit and for-profit, volunteering is at the core of establishing long-term business affairs and making sure that you have a core base of people that will help sustain you. And volunteering is not just about the fulfillment of sustaining businesses, but it's also about the fulfillment of oneself. Looking outside of ourselves and giving to volunteering is a spiritual reward. And that's one of the emphasis of what Dave's book is. Maker's Bar audience, it has been a distinct honor and pleasure to have one of the men in my life. There are mentors. My dad told me there are mentors, and then there are mentors. And Dave Powell has been one of those mentors for me. He has been one of those mentors for me that has been instrumental in my understanding. There we have him again. Fantastic. Dave? Dave? We are having that.
Yes, I didn't fall asleep on you, honest.
No, I think we were having some issue. I actually was rattling on and bragging about my inspiration coming from you and the motivation you've given me, and about the benefits of volunteering spiritually, the benefits to an organization, and giving out the title again about what the difference that volunteering can make to one's soul and their life. And I was actually just bragging a great deal about how you've been one of the instrumental mentors in my life as far as understanding the importance of volunteering and what it meant to me in the fulfillment of myself. So I do apologize that we had some of those technical problems, Dave. Uh-oh. And of course, we'd have this technical problems again. So I'm going to be very loose here and say this man has been inspirational as a mentor to me, and he has been a long-term established friend. Please forgive us, and my sincere apologies on behalf of Maker's Bar for some of the audio challenges. We're going to look into it and get back to you. The book is Hands On, a volunteer guide to making a difference. The author is Dave Powell, Mastering the Art of Managing, Recruiting, and Recognizing Volunteers. We want to thank Dave, and again, to our audience, my apologies. We will look into what has happened in the audio in our studio. Here is the thought for the day. Volunteering is one thing. We discussed the book and the importance of doing volunteerism. Lost my train. Oh, yes, with volunteering. But I do want to say, today's times, we look for things that are going to fulfill our spirit. Volunteering is one of those things. Considering we all don't necessarily have the time even to have free time for ourselves, what we will look for is spiritual fulfillment. And if I may advise you to check out Dave Powell's book on volunteering, 1 hour, 2 hours, a month, or even a week will be fulfillment to your soul. I guarantee it. I still volunteer to this day with youth and government and the YMCA as often as I can. And as a busy person myself, volunteering is one of those things that contributes to it does contribute to the foundational aspects of your soul. Please, wherever you get your books, through Amazon, and our LinkedIn. You're able to contact there. We have Dave again. Dave, can you hear us?
I
Fantastic.
can hear
Dave,
you.
fantastic. I apologize to the audience, and I want to go on again. Here is the book, ladies and gentlemen, Hands On, a Volunteering. Thank you, Dave, so much for looking at, for holding up the book. Please check out the book on Amazon and many platforms where you're able to order books. Look into Dave. If you want further information on it, you can also look into Dave's LinkedIn account. He's on LinkedIn. Dave Powell, we thank you from the Makers Bar Association. And on behalf of myself, in admiration of all the love and dedication you've given, not only to the YMCA, but to me and thousands of other young people, how you've been instrumental in us giving our time and efforts wholeheartedly for ourselves in volunteering. Thank you, Dave, so much. It has done my heart more good than I could even express here in this telecast and or this podcast for what you've meant to me and thousands of others. You are really a superhero to a number of us as former YMCA professionals and people who have gone into the helping industry on what you've meant to us. And Dave, I love you dearly, my dear friend, and I'm so glad you chose to share some of your time and forgive us for the technical aspect of what happened today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And thank you very much for inviting me to do this.
Thank you so much, Dave. And again, ladies and gentlemen, Hands On, a volunteer guide to making a difference from Dave Powell. Remember, the revolution is the Lovolution. We at Makers Bar, we are looking to create 1 million leaders today for tomorrow. And volunteering is one of those ways we can do that. Peace, love, and participate. Stand up. Makers Bar signing off, creating 1 million leaders today for tomorrow. Dave Powell, we thank you again here at Makers Bar.
Thank you.
It's your boy, Seth Guru Baxter, signing off.
Well, I don't know what happened there, but